Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Papa Saw Shop. I'm Papa. Good to see you again. Today, kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about screws. Okay, so if you've talked to me at all one on one, or if you've called in, or um, uh, talked to me through text or email or anything like that, you'll know that I talk a lot about assembly screws and how important that is. Um, So let me tell you a little story. Okay, we're going to start this off with a little story time. So, um, as some of you know, the HP series saws, the smaller old goat saws that we make, well, they were tough. They were really tough, and the reason being is because they're modeled after a 200T chainsaw. And the 200T saw in its day was a pretty doggone good saw all by itself. Um, the um, the bigger saws, I mean, there was a lot of room for improvement. There was a lot of things that we could kind of tinker with, and we could do that forced air thing, and some of that stuff. And um, the smaller HP series saw, though, there there was a few things. And I don't want to get into a whole bunch of it because I always make these things way too long-winded, anyways. But anyway, one of the things that I noticed with the old saws, with the old 200Ts, and I've got an old 201 here. I'll bring out here. I didn't have any 200Ts hanging around, and the HP series saws, they fly out of here as soon as they're built. Um, But Alpine's got one of these on her bench over here that on one of her destructo bench, as she calls it. The stuff comes in and she tears it all down and sorts all the pieces out and decides what's good and what's not good, and it gets distributed throughout the whole place. But anyway, so she's got this on her bench, and I said, well, when we're doing screws, I'll just talk about this. So the 201 and the 200 have pretty much the same, and the internals are different, of course. But as far as how they screw on to the case itself, they're pretty similar. Um, and so when we first came out with the HP series, we of course were using grade 8 screws, and I'm going to get to all that in a minute. Um, but we were using grade 8 screws, and we realized right from the start that when we put our grade 8 cylinder head screws in, and I'm going to see if I can get this light just here so you can see and you're not blinded by it. So you can see, let me grab a screwdriver here here's a better one. Oh, she's so well organized on here, it's crazy. All right, so here's the cylinder head screw right here, one of them, okay? And you can kind of see the one over here where it comes down. You see where it you only got this much room for that screw to go in here. And over here, you've just got pretty much this room right here. There's kind of a notch right back in there for some reason. Um, right there, there's an indent in the case. And so we noticed right from the start that when we put our grade 8 screws in here, that they went all the way down to that notch, and I was kind of tickled by it. I thought, well, that's pretty cool. It's like it was made to be there. Except that little thing right there led to a disaster. I had a recall on them, and it was a disaster. It was a nice thing that it was all local recall. I didn't have to pull them in from all over the country, but um, it turns out that, slap your forehead and call yourself stupid, as this heats up, it tends to swell. When this tends to swell, there's no give. And so this, basically what was happening is that since we were taking this screw all the way down there, I thought that was the end. We were done. You put the screw in all the way down, and then it feels tight and it's all good. Well, it feels tight because it's bottoming out right there. And it was literally the distance of a fingernail that there was a gap right here. Now, because we seal the head, we seal the cylinder head in there, it takes a little bit for this issue to flare up because it takes a little bit for that seal to break loose. Once it does, when this cylinder head heats up, it gets just that minute little distance right in here, and it causes a small vacuum leak. And it's just because it's all the way around, it causes enough of a vacuum leak that you don't notice when it's cool. When the engine's cold, it starts right up, everything runs great. When it's warm and it swells up just that fraction of an inch, it's just enough to make everything lug. And because the clearances on our saws are so tight, that little bit of a vacuum leak made all the difference in the world. So we brought them all back, and we said, simple problem. We take our grade 8 screws and we cut them right down there. Now we have to specially cut those because it actually costs us less to cut those in-house than it does for our supplier to cut them. So they come in a certain length. We cut them all down, and then we put them in there, and then we sort them from there. It's a tedious little job, but obviously it has to be done. But it got me thinking. If a manufacturer of a saw, I'm not picking on anybody, any manufacturer, if they're using a lesser grade screw, is that screw being allowed to stretch and then pull back? Is that possible? Is it possible that sometimes when we get a saw that say, boy, it runs great, and then sometimes not so much, is it that possibly the screw is able to stretch, and under the heat, we're talking about just microscopic clearances, but it doesn't take much, especially in a small saw. And so there's been quite a few saws that I've noticed that come in that have a shiny spot around the lower part of the piston, which can indicate a vacuum leak. And I'm thinking, I think I see that more and more all the time. Now I'm seeing that with some of the name brand saws as well. I'm seeing that with quite a few. I've got one on the bench that we just talked about in one of my last videos, an 025. I've got one here on the half pints bench here that I just brought up just to show the screw in it. So when I talk about assembly screws, now I want to get into why that's important. Because not everything on a chainsaw is a tight clearance like a cylinder head. But why is it important? Why can't you just, if you're talking about just the front case, it's all plastic. What does it matter if I put in a plastic screw? Well, let's get into it, okay? So I'm going to turn you around a little bit here so you can kind of see the different kinds of screws that I got laid out here. And don't worry about it, I'm going to pick them up for you and show you what I got. All right, let's get all this other junk out of the way. All right, so we are going to pick a little bit on steel. Well, just because, don't make it easy for me. All right. Okay, so let me show you what I got laid out here. I'm just going to go ahead and just pick you up here because you can't see this. Let me get you flipped around here. Don't. And there you are. All right, now you can see. Okay, so I've got a few different kinds of screws laid out here. Now, I am no machinist. All right, I'm just going to get that right on the table right now. I am not a machinist, so I can't tell you what a screw is made out of. All right, I just know from what I know. Okay, so I do know that there are steel screws, S-T-E-E-L, and there are zinc screws, and there are cast iron screws. Okay, and I do know that they are, for the most part, all made out of wire. When they first start out, they're made out of wire. Okay, so at some point, this used to be a piece of wire. All right, and then it got formed into a screw. Got cut down, they put threads in it, and all that kind of stuff. All right. Now, are these screws all the same? Well, let's get out my magnet here. And I got a regular little screwdriver from my steel kit. Okay, so you see that's a magnet. Let me get her pulled off here with one hand. Now this will be fun trying to do this with one hand. All right, this shiny looking screw right here, that looks awfully shiny. I don't know, is that aluminum or what? I don't know, it's magnetic. All right, it's got to be steel, right? I don't know. We'll see. All right, these old steel assembly screws. Okay, they'll stick right to it. All right, now, these are grade 8 screws. They all come up here. I honestly don't know what that means. I don't know if maybe they're just all closer together. I don't know. Yeah, these will all come together. All right, so it doesn't mean anything, Papa. It just means that your screws are in a tighter circle. All right, and then you got, this is a steel head screw from a newer saw, and then of course you got one of our head screws, our cylinder head screws. So those are both magnetic. All right, so everything is there is magnetic. Now, just for giggles, back here, I always tell everybody that comes in and ask, that if you do a saw kit, if you do a duplicate saw, what do you do with the screws? Well, I've got tubs of these things, and my son, he comes in here and he takes these things and he'll melt them down and turns them into fishing weights. He does tell me that it doesn't take a whole lot of heat to melt those down. You can do it over a fireplace. So I'm going to get to that in a minute. All right, but these are out of a saw kit. Okay, these are out of probably a couple of saw kits. But they look like cheap aluminum knockoff screws, right? Well, let's find out. By golly, they're not aluminum. All right. But if you've ever used one of those, you know that they're not the same quality. They just don't hold up. I mean, even their jagged screws, like these, aren't the same quality. But, dang it, I got a magnet sticking to everything. They're still magnetic. But if I set that in there, yeah, it looks a lot like all the rest of them. And they're all magnetic. Okay, but I played a trick on you. Now I'm picking on people. This screw came out of here. Okay. Let's put her right back in that piece of plastic there. All right. So, what are you getting at, Papa? All right, here's what I'm getting at. Now, again, I'm not a machinist, so I only know what I know. I know that these screws here, only because I watched a YouTube video and I watch how screws are made. I know that these screws were preheated in the factory when they made them, okay? And I know that these screws were preheated to a higher temperature because they're made out of solid steel, STEEL. I'm not talking about any brand names. All right, so these are made out of a solid steel, solid iron, whatever. And these are either zinc or zinc coated. And these are generally, and don't hold me to this, because again, I'm not a machinist, and so there's my disclaimer through this whole thing. But I want to say that these are made out of some kind of a zinc, not really steel, made out of more of a zinc. They're a lot lighter. I don't want to say they're not as sturdy, because it just depends on how you use them and how you treat them. They can stretch a bit, to some extent. But they're certainly not like an aluminum screw. All right. So this, I don't know why I picked up this one, but this is basically this is a solid handle screw off of a bigger unit that she just took apart. That's the same material as this. Okay. Now, I've got a stump grinder out here that's got about 90% of the screws on it are made out of this. Made out of these. And if you put these kind of bolts on it or these kind of screws on it, it would just tear them up. All right. So, whenever you order a HP series saw from me, you're going to get these bolts. All right, because we build those things really, really tough. We build them a little more power. They're expected to be a lot more durable. They're expected to last a lot longer than the old 200s, and they're expected to last a lot longer than a duplicate saw. Because I know, again, I just know what I know, and I know these are tougher. I've seen it my whole life. If I had to say a second best, I would say the old Stihl STIHL screws were pretty doggone tough back in the day. What I'm seeing more and more is that the new Stihl screws, and this came out of the rear cover of that 194, they are looking a lot like that. That scares me. Okay. So, and the reason that scares me, I gotta leave that aside so I can put it back. Just back here so you can see it. All right. So the reason that scares me is because of the issue that we had with the 200, with the HP. Okay, converting the 200 to an HP. That small space, it seems to me like that leads to a lot of issues. Okay, I have a guy that one of my customers that he buys all aftermarket parts, buys all aftermarket saws, loves them, and I can't get him changed over to anything else. He doesn't want to do one of my duplicate saws. He didn't, and the reason being is, and I got to admit, he's got a good point. He says, "Look, Papa, here's the thing. I get a clone saw right out of the box for a couple $100. I hand it to a greenhorn that doesn't know anything, and he drops a tree branch on it. Hey, I'm out a couple $100. If I drop a tree branch on an HP saw, well, you're going to take care of me, but some stuff is not going to be warranted because I dropped the tree branch on it." So he's got a very valid point. And so I said, okay, well, I can understand that, but how long does your clone saws last? So if I get 3 to 6 months out of them, I'm doing fantastic, and then it's just a part saw. Now, I'm not saying that that's all the life you're going to get out of a clone saw. That would be really unfair to say. But he's understanding application. He's using this thing professionally every single day, 8 to 12 hours a day, handing it to people that sometimes, have to really be trained from the ground up how to operate a saw, because right now good help is hard to find, and any help is hard to find, and so he's having to train these guys, and they make mistakes. So these clone saws are just they're going through their own private hell right out of the box. So if he can get 3 to 6 months out of a $200 saw, hand it to a greenhorn, hey, fantastic. If you can get 6 months without that guy dropping it or drop something on it or whatever, you're probably doing pretty good. But if you're getting a saw for yourself and you know how to treat a saw, and you can treat it well, and you can take care of it, If you get a clone saw right out of the box, first of all, you got to understand, just like a used car, you're in the infamous words of Tom T. Hall, you are buying a new used car. All right, so you're going to have to understand right out of the box. You buy a clone saw, you're going to have some weak screws. You're going to have some weak aftermarket parts that were not inspected. I get plenty. I mean, boy, I could show you stuff that I've seen in these aftermarket kits. It just makes you crazy looking at it. I've seen vacuum boots with no vacuum hole down the center. It's supposed to be a vacuum boot, and it's a solid piece of rubber. I know that's you think about that for a minute. When you look at a vacuum boot, you see the hole through it. It's a tunnel. Yeah, no. Some of these have came in and there's no tunnel. It's just solid rubber all the way through it. So, you're not going to buy a saw like that, an already assembled saw. I wouldn't think so. I've never seen an already assembled, aftermarket saw. I've never bought one personally, so I guess I don't know. But from what I understand, they start and run right out of the box. But my point is that if you're getting an aftermarket saw, you got to understand that, it's made with, these screws and everything in it. I'm not going to say is substandard, but the thing that the big boys have over the aftermarket market is quality control. And for the most part, from what I see in a lot of parts, there is a slight difference between, I would say, most of the parts. There's a slight difference. There's a different feel. But as far as durability, it's pretty doggone close to the same. It's just that somebody came along, somebody somewhere was there on the big label saw, and something came across it on the assembly line, and somebody had the chance to go, oh, that ain't right. Here, try that again. Don't use that. And on the aftermarket stuff, that person didn't exist. I don't think that person was there. I could be wrong, but I don't think so. So you got to understand, if you're going to buy a clone saw, I always say you are the quality control. So you're always going to have to be the sawyer and the quality control for the builder of that chainsaw. Now, if you have us build a duplicate saw, you are no longer the quality control. We have got in the kit, we have done the quality control on every single part, and any part that we see substandard, we throw that out and we put either OEM or we put equal to OEM in it. Sometimes they break. I can't say they're not going to break. OEM stuff breaks. It's the nature of the beast. But it's not going to break as quick as the stuff right out of the box. All right. So you're basically with a duplicate saw, you're getting these screws. Okay. I don't know if you can see in the light. And we're using those screws for fishing weights. And in some cases, you're getting these screws. Now, if you're buying an HP saw, you're going to get grade 8 screws right out of the box. Grade 8 screws right out of the box. That's every assembly screw, we put a grade 8 screw in it. Now, you might get some of these screws, not the cheap ones, but you might get the what I would call just the lesser grade of a grade 8. You might get that in like the plastic covers and things like that. But you're not going to see these shiny things in an old goat saw. So we don't put those in there. If they got put in there, you let me know, and it was purely by mistake. It shouldn't be there, and I will definitely send you some different screws if that's what you got to do, or we'll recall the whole saw. So anyway, I just want to point that out as far as screws. That there is a difference, and sometimes the difference is very, very tiny and can affect everything with the life of the saw, with how it runs, with how it operates, with everything. Um, but when you buy a duplicate saw with us, if you buy an HP or a PS series, um, we're not using any of this cheap crap. We're putting the very best that we can put in it, and we're quality control inspecting every single part. I think I've said it before in different videos that I touch every single part of every single saw that comes out of here, and so I'm looking at it very, very close. Um, so anyway, I hope that kind of helps out with. We're showing you the difference as far as assembly screws, and the difference in makes and grades and all that kind of stuff. And I urge you to look up on YouTube, or do a little research on screws and assembly screws, and how they're made and stuff. It's kind of no, it's not interesting. It's boring. It's boring as hell. Yeah, I'm not even going to go there. It's boring as hell. Uh, but it is some knowledge worth having when you're ordering something like a chainsaw, or something like that, that you're hoping it's all going to stay together. So anyway, I've talked way too long. One more time, and it's supposed to be my day off, but thought I'd get out here and explain this kind of stuff to you real quick. And I'm gonna get out of here and maybe go drink a cold one or some doggone thing. I don't know. But until next time, hey, y'all be careful out there. I mean that. And happy motoring.